Jimi Hendrix's friend Eric Burdon found a note in Hendrix's apartment shortly after his death. That's when Burdon almost cost Hendrix his legacy by making a disturbing announcement. When people think of Jimi Hendrix, they picture the wild hair, flamboyant clothes, electrifying guitar solos, and of course, the man who set stages and guitars on fire in the late 1960s. But what does it take to rise so high above the noise that the world has no choice but to watch? In Hendrix's case, the answer wasn't just talent. It was tragedy, chaos, and a life that burned as intensely as his music. Born in the early 1940s in Seattle, Washington, Hendrix's troubles started long before his mother even gave birth to him. The army drafted his father just 3 days after his parents married, and thanks to some questionable military politics, his father missed his birth. When Al Hendrix got back to Seattle, he found his home completely empty. Without her husband around, Hendrix's mother found it difficult to care for her son. She found it so difficult, in fact, that she turned to the bottle to get through it. Her relatives had stepped in to help raise Jimmy, which is why his father couldn't find his family. Eventually, the family reunited, but as it turns out, Hendrix's father struggled with drinking too. When his parents drank too much, they argued ferociously, often to the point of getting physical. During elementary school, Jimmy developed an attachment to an unusual object, a broom. He'd pretend it was a guitar and carry it around with him like another child might carry around their favourite teddy bear. His family couldn't afford the real thing, so he made do until he managed to secure a one-stringed ukulele he found in the garbage. But one string could only get him so far. Jimmy secured his first real guitar at 15 years old. He spent hours learning his new instrument, studying artists like B.B. King and Robert Johnson. Right around this time, he met his first love, Betty Jean Morgan, during high school, and dated her for several years. He loved her so much that he wrote her name on his guitar. Before long, Jimmy started rebelling against authority. He got into trouble with the law at least twice before he turned 19. Both times they caught him joyriding in stolen vehicles. Instead of putting him away, authorities offered him another option: to join the army. Hendrix struggled throughout his time in basic training. The other men teased him often, and even more so when he got his guitar sent from home and they saw how attached he was to it. A little over a year after his enlistment, Jimmy was kicked out of the service. While he later told the story that he had to leave because of an injury, official reports from his superiors state it was because he was lazy and uninterested in the work, not worth the liability out in the field. During his time in the army, Hendrix met bassist Billy Cox. The two quickly formed a musical friendship, playing together so much that they started finding gigs around town on the weekends. Once Hendrix left the service, the two headed off together and kept on playing. Together they managed to find consistent work playing in small venues and clubs. They spent 2 years working the Chitlin Circuit, a group of small places in the south that welcomed black performers, in a time when most larger venues didn't. It was during this time that Hendrix developed one extremely bizarre bodily skill. During a stint in Tennessee, Hendrix saw one of his bandmates play the guitar with his teeth. Although his skill already put him a cut above the rest, he still had one issue: his problem with authority. In this case, that gave him trouble with band leaders who called the shots at his gigs. So in 1964, he officially quit the Chitlin Circuit, looking for better opportunities. He headed for Harlem, and that's where he first laid eyes on Lithophane Pridgeon. Faye worked as a backup singer and frequented the music scene in Harlem and in the South. Depending on whose story you believe, the two practically fell in love at first sight. Not only did she provide for him in low times, but she also invested in his talent, using her own connections to help him out. And although she claims they never made things official, Hendrix found himself head over heels in love with a woman he couldn't tie down. In the end, Faye didn't want to stop dating other men despite her affection for Jimi. According to her, Hendrix was insanely jealous of her free love life. She remained special to him, so much so that he'd eventually write a popular song about the cute little heartbreaker. And though she didn't settle down with him, she gave him just what he needed to take the next step. That same year, Hendrix got a huge leg up when a friend of a friend got him an audition for the Isley Brothers. He played background for the band on tunes like Testify and Mercy Mercy. Then Jimi landed a spot playing in the band of rock and roll legend Little Richard. Working with Richard got Hendrix his first TV spot and opportunities to work with other major artists. But just like he always seemed to do, he found a way to mess things up with the man in charge. About a year after he began working with him, Little Richard gave Jimi Hendrix the boot. The two never really got along, reportedly due to Hendrix's tendency to be late, as well as his propensity for getting extra flashy on stage. But one other thing really got under Little Richard's skin: Hendrix's unusual fashion sense. In 1966, Hendrix relocated to Greenwich Village. He likely felt right at home in the lower Manhattan neighbourhood, buzzing with musicians of just about all genres. But there, in the heart of the creative hotspot, Hendrix started experimenting with all kinds of mind-altering substances. Jimi met Linda Keith, Keith Richards' girlfriend, while playing at a popular New York City music spot. Allegedly, she was so mesmerised by his guitar playing that she struck up a conversation with him. She recommended him to manager Chaz Chandler, who took Hendrix on and persuaded him to go to London to pursue his career there. Once in London, he signed a new contract and gave an unplanned performance that marked the beginning of his stellar rise. Hendrix met his next girlfriend, a DJ named Kathy Etchingham, at that first London performance. She became his new muse, ultimately inspiring songs like The Wind Cries Mary and Gypsy Eyes. Once he had his recording deal, Jimi went to work putting together the perfect band. He auditioned several musicians, judging them both on musical ability and, interestingly enough, what they wore. In the end, he managed to set up the Jimi Hendrix Experience for the kind of skyrocketing success the music world rarely saw. The new band performed their first official gig on October 13th, 1966, as the opening act for John Halliday. The audience loved them. They recorded their first single, Hey Joe, shortly after that, and took on their second performance the following November. During that second performance, the Experience's new fans got a little too excited. Hyped up on the music, they practically dragged Jimi off the stage. In response, and seemingly to get all the people away from him, he smashed his guitar, and the crowd went wilder. The amped-up crowd thought the entire thing was just part of the show. Hendrix's manager latched onto the hype and figured he'd push Hendrix even further. Jimi's star shot up with unusual speed, so much so that critics called him Mr. Phenomenon. Jimi followed his stage debut with a wildly successful first album, Are You Experienced? And by the time he set fire to his guitar at the end of another legendary performance at the Monterey Pop Festival, he'd made quite the name for himself. While working on his second album, Hendrix nearly ruined the entire thing. Reportedly, he lost one of the master tapes for the record, forcing the team to remake it in a rush. In the end, they managed to get an album out that fans still loved, Axis, bold as love. But everyone on the team didn't love having to put up with Hendrix's blunders, and the cracks in their young foundation soon started to show. For exclusive perks like early access to new videos, priority replies to your comments, and to have your say on future content, consider becoming a Factinate member. On top of that, your support helps keep the channel going. Click the link in the description for more details. Things came to a head in 1968 when Jimi began work on his third album, Electric Ladyland. He had a pretty unique manner of recording. He regularly brought multiple people into the recording studio, creating an environment that felt a lot more like a party than work. But despite all the groupies he brought into the studio, Hendrix still wanted his actual recordings to be perfect. He often demanded several takes of a single part, further prolonging the production process. Things got so bad that Chandler, the manager who helped get Hendrix to the top, finally gave up on him and quit. Even so, Hendrix's genius prevailed. Once Electric Ladyland went public, it became his best-selling album yet. That same year, he let his substance use get the best of him, starting a dangerous trend of run-ins with the law. It started at a tour stop in Sweden, where he ended up getting arrested after a drunken altercation. By 1969, the experience seemed destined to fall apart. The main issues within the band stemmed from the dissonance between Hendrix and bassist Noel Redding. Redding couldn't deal with Jimi Hendrix anymore. He found him irresponsible and hard to predict, and commented on how much more difficult it was to work with him because of his substance use. So by the time they arrived at their final performance, the writing was on the wall. The Experience performed their last set of shows at the Denver Pop Festival in 1969. Riled up by the music and the generally chaotic aura surrounding the band, the fans went nuts. They got so crazy that authorities used tear gas to subdue them. Unbeknownst to Redding, Hendrix had publicly announced plans to replace him weeks earlier. Redding found out from a curious journalist, became understandably furious, and quit the group on the spot. And that turned out to be the end of the Experience. All things considered, Hendrix still maintained his spot as a certified superstar. In that same year, he officially broke a record, becoming the highest paid rock musician in the world. As such, he landed a spot headlining the iconic Woodstock Festival. But everything was far from perfect. He had to play with musicians he didn't know, and he harboured anxiety about the size of the crowd. On August 16th, 1969, Hendrix gave a performance that remains one of Woodstock's most legendary moments. He gave a standout performance of the Star-Spangled Banner, using his guitar to imitate the sounds of war, a musical protest against the unrest in Vietnam at the time. One critic called it the single greatest moment of the 60s. Hendrix didn't know it then, but this proved to be his last hurrah. The rest of that year was characterised by evidence that Hendrix was truly spiralling out of control. Authorities found drugs in his bags as he passed through Toronto Airport and ultimately charged him. Although the charges were later dropped and some of his friends claimed he was set up, clearly Hendrix was slipping downward. In that same year, he gave love another try with Monika Dannemann, a German ice skater. They got engaged the following year and found a place to stay together in London while Hendrix set out on his Cry of Love tour. Hendrix managed several years ripping it up on stage while spiralling into substance abuse behind the scenes, but during the 1970 tour, it caught up with him. In one instance, he walked off the stage before finishing a performance, leaving with the simple statement, "I've been dead a long time." September 17th, 1970 started like any other day for Hendrix and his fiancée. They spent the day together as normal and stayed up till early the next morning, chatting until they fell asleep. When Dannemann woke up the next morning, she found Hendrix unconscious. By the time he got to the hospital, it proved too late. Quickly after, a friend of his raced to his apartment to do a sweep before the authorities could, but nothing could prepare him for what he was about to find. When Hendrix died, his friend Eric Burden of The Animals quickly scoured his apartment to remove any traces of drugs that the authorities might find. It was then that he discovered a poem Hendrix had written mere hours before his death, titled The Story of Life. Since Burden had discussed death and taking one's own life with Hendrix before, he assumed that the poem was that kind of note. Without thinking, Burden made a huge mistake. He appeared on the BBC to confirm that Hendrix had taken his own life. He would later recant this statement, saying, "I made false statements. I simply didn't understand what the situation was. I misread the note. I thought it was a goodbye." At this point, the autopsy report came back. In the end, examiners determined that Hendrix had been intoxicated and choked on his own vomit. Reportedly, he'd taken an excessive amount of his fiancée's sleeping pills, so at just 27 years old, Hendrix was gone, but not without a legacy and just a little extra chaos in his wake. Several of Hendrix's albums were released after his death, and while his fans applauded the continuation of his legacy, his father found himself struggling to secure the rights to his son's music. In the end, he did manage to secure them, and continues to protect and share his son's catalogue to this day. If you enjoyed this Factinate video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. If you want a say in who we cover next, join our membership programme through the link in the description for exclusive perks. Your support means everything to us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.